radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Vision radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear. Good morning, UCY.TV radio listeners. This is Lonnie Clark with the Age of Fission radio show. I want to add in a gentleman named Mr. Larry Woods, who is a retired electrical engineer who's working on some dynamic energy processes. We had him on the phone right before the show, and the call dropped twice as soon as we called into the radio show. So I'm going to give him a call again. If we have a bit of silence, I'm going to call you right back and we'll reconnect. So hang on tight. Let's see if this experiment works. Nope. Can't get through to him. That is so bizarre. Wow. Somebody sure doesn't want him on. Wow. Okay, hold on. I'll have him mute. I'm going to give him my phone number. This has never happened. Someone sure doesn't want him on the radio with us. Let's see if he can give us a call. Well, that is a real bummer because his ideas are so dynamic. I can't wait to get him on the air. So let's see if he gets a call. Oh my God, it won't let him call? Well, let's just see what happens. What's that? He's trying to give me some experiments. I'm sorry about this, you guys. Mr. Larry Woods is a scientist, and we had him on the phone, and for some reason, his phone number is blocked, and I have no idea what that means. He's no idea. I'm typing to him. We can connect through Skype. I'm going to ask him to, again, I'm going to ask him to call my number. See if he can get through. And I'm going to see if I can get him through. That number will not go through at all. That number will not go through. So this idea, yay! Okay, then. Are you there, Larry?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so then my final thing is send our producer a little notice and ask her if we are heard. So I believe we're on. It's taken us 4 minutes to get through. So let me just type her a little message. Let's assume that they can hear us because I can hear you and you can hear me, and we only connect through Skype. So, and it does show UCY. It doesn't show you connected to me, though. So I'm just going to...
I think UCY has to accept my
No,
contact
that's not it at all. I call in on my own number. In fact, my call-in number, if you ever want to call into the show, is 718-717-8106. I purchased this number so that I wouldn't have that issue. There was a lot of calls dropping. And frankly, I think it comes from just the corrupted system of nobody gets to talk about nuclear. And I have too many people on that are talking about alternative ideas and exposing the facts. So it's kind of like a little NSA glitch they've given us. But well, let's move on. I'm glad that you were with us. This is Larry Woods. He is basically a retired electrical engineer. That's correct, Larry. And
Yes,
he
ma'am.
is working on alternative energy and figuring out ways that we can get off the grid, because the grid is going to get off of us one of these days. It's not a matter of when the grid goes, if the grid goes down, it's a matter of when the grid goes down and how we're going to handle it. So this is what Larry's working on and talking about. Larry, why don't you introduce a little bit about yourself to our listeners and the projects that you're working on and how you believe they can help our situation.
Okay, I'm a retired electrical engineer and also a master journeyman union electrician. Uh, Most of the designs that I did as an engineer, I literally worked on the electrical crew that installed them. I designed and installed the communication system for the Sprint complex in Overland Park, Kansas. Uh, their inter office and inter system communication system is what I designed, not their broadcast system. Uh, I worked in frequency and power factor correction most of my working career. I've saved FCC licenses for various telephone companies by removing the static from their phone lines. Um, Things like that. I've really enjoyed working as an electrician more than I enjoyed working as an engineer. Just I sort of like the hands-on type thing. Um, since then, uh, when I graduated from college and got to be an engineer, I thought for 32 years that I knew everything there was to know about electricity. Boy, was I wrong. After I retired, uh, one of my very good friends and now business partner opened my eyes to the fact that what I was taught in school was only a very, very small portion of the entire reality. We learned vortex math from Marco Rodin. That's the newest thing that we studied. We studied pyramid math, Solomon math, the Fibonacci sequence, of course, and the golden spiral. So all of these things have sort of opened our eyes to the fact that power as we know it is not efficient. Standard electrical transformer is only 60% efficient at best. So that means that you're paying 40% more to operate it than what it should actually cost.
Wow.
So it's the inefficiency that drove us to design a new type of a coil.
Don't you think that the inefficiency was designed?
Oh, absolutely. J.P. Morgan said if you can't pay for it every month, I'm not going to support it. That's
Right.
why we are totally against a grid system. Solar is
Okay.
great, wind is great. Both of them are very high maintenance and they perpetuate a grid system. Those people are getting it for free except for the maintenance, and you're still paying every single month to get it. That's not what I call free energy.
Uh-huh. So what's this idea? How would it work? You have a new source of energy that you and your partners are working on, a new way to provide us energy. Let's put it to you that way. So how does the overall picture work? Like, how would a city be powered by this that's off the grid? What would happen in that scenario?
there would be no such thing as a city being powered by this. Every device that takes an electrical power supply will be self-powered. Your
Would every
refrigerator,
single house have something on it, or
every
what?
every single house will have its own generator that's attached to your main distribution panel. It'll be a magnetic drive system that does not consume electricity to operate. It's all magnetic induction. Uh, there'll be one. At this point, it's about a 3-foot cube that our device will go into with a disconnect on the outside of it. You run from the load side of that disconnect to the line side of your main distribution panel, and you're done. There will
So
be
could you put that on like our houses are all built to have electricity, right? So is this like 3 by 3 cube something we'd install at the side of our house where our electrical box is, where the fuse box is outside, or whatever that's called?
well, yeah,
The meter?
where not where your meter is, but where your breaker box is.
Yeah.
You put it right inside next to that. You could put it out at the meter and feed the meter socket with it. But
The
that would
breaker box, is that the thing that like has the fuses on it and stuff like that?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Okay, so this is a question. In my house, the breaker box is inside.
yeah.
So where would I put that?
You could put it on the floor under it. Use it for a table. Uh,
Hmm.
you could put it outside where your meter is and use the entrance cable from the meter socket to feed your panel, like it's
So you could
done.
actually run a cable to your meter to your fuse box.
Yeah, uh, where the wire comes in from the meter and goes to the very top of the fuse box. Disconnect that. You're not going to need that anymore. Replace that wire with ours, and you're done.
Okay. Wow.
Now,
Wow.
there's a major drawback to our equipment, though. In order to achieve 60 cycles, which is what everybody in the United States runs on, 50 cycles and 60 cycle electricity runs the world. Everybody has either got 50 cycle or 60 cycle. Most everybody. So with that, then if you tune our coil to 54 cycles, both the 50 and 60 will operate at 10% plus or minus. 54 cycles falls into that category. 54 times 8 is 432, which will put us back in resonance with the Earth and away from the 440 detrimental frequencies that they're broadcasting with now.
Huh.
So it would be safe to live under a power line.
Uh-huh.
This
And so
equipment,
all the electrical power lines that are spread all over this country, they basically become useless.
yeah,
Wow. That would
absolutely.
be an industry in itself, just cleaning that stuff up.
Yes. Yeah, we're gonna make jobs for everybody. There's gonna be so much work out of this that it'll go on for years and years. Um,
Wow. Wow. Well, how close are you guys to actually actuating this idea and making it marketable?
we hope to get funding the 1st of April. We're
Wow.
really close.
Wow.
If that all goes through, within 6 months, we will have a machine that can wind our coils, and then the sky's the limit.
Wow.
Actually, Andromeda's the limit.
So it sounds like this is like a kind of an electrical revolution.
100%. Yes, totally. But what we've done is eliminated the eddy currents. The eddy currents are what causes coils to heat up. Okay, that's because uh, the magnetic fields are opposing one another. And it's like throwing a boulder into a river. The water has to go around that boulder, and it creates what's called an eddy current in the water behind the boulder, which is where the current is slowed down That's the same thing that happens on an electrical coil when the wiring is not correct. And that's what causes them to heat up. The extra heat causes them to draw more amperage. The more amperage they draw, the more it costs you to operate them. So that's where
Well, do
we
you have this
eliminate that
functioning? Is
part.
it functioning in your own house? Have you put one in your own house, or have you not?
Yes, I have a subsystem on my house, a very small system. It's less than half the size. In fact, it's about a quarter of the size of the unit that we want to put on a house. And my electric bill went from a little over $150 a month to $46 a month.
Now, did your electrical company balk at you having any kind of a booster or anything like that?
I have an automatic transfer switch and and a manual cutoff by the meter, just so
Mm-hmm.
that if they ever have to come and operate on it, work on it, then they can turn my power off to their equipment. But
Uh-huh.
what I don't use goes back to their system, and they have to buy it.
Oh,
So
wow.
my bill is reduced by the amount of power that I put back into the system.
Kind of like solar panels.
Yeah, same
Now,
principle.
what's the difference between the effectiveness of the solar powers and your product?
I'm glad you asked. Um, I have a solar panel that is designed to charge a cell phone. It's 3 volts and it produces 500 milliamps. Okay, that sounds like a lot, but it's not. When we power our coil with that, you get 30 amps, not 500 milliamps. You get
Wow.
30 amps out of it.
Wow.
So from less than half an amp or around a half an amp to 30 amps is the difference that our equipment will make.
Well, the other good part about your equipment is it doesn't use uranium. I know that's one of the things with the solar panels. It's still a uranium-based product. You have to use uranium to build solar panels the way they've designed them.
And the energy cost to make solar is much, much higher than the energy cost to just burn coal.
What do you mean, the energy cost? What does that mean?
In order to make a solar panel,
Uh-huh.
it takes more energy than what the solar panel is going to produce. So they're really
Okay.
counterproductive.
Okay. So once you get the panel, it's great, but it's the production of the panel that's actually environmentally detrimental.
That's right. It's gonna use more power to make those panels than we're using right now to just burn coal.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
And
So, if you go into production, how does this thing get to? I mean, what's the plan to get this to market? Do you guys have a plan on how to? Because my inclination is that the current power companies, all these, like well, here we have the Bonneville Power uh, Consortium. I don't know what the Power Administration, that's what they call it, BPA, and they're basically like we have they're a consortium of 59 utility companies that generate energy, and we get a portion of our energy from the Columbia Generating Station. So part of what's tied into that is the forcing us to use nuclear. It only produces 4% of our energy, but we're forced to use it whether we want it or not. So my question is, how do we get your new system into what is obviously a correct power grid? I mean, what you said, there's no power grid.
none
That
whatsoever.
so it's just like a product that you would sell, say, to the landlords. Would like I live in a rental, right? So in my rental, my landlord would upgrade my apartment and put this thing in. Is that how that would work?
Yeah, or if it's a large apartment building, we can make generators that will power big buildings and small industry. So you just take the whole building off the grid.
So I would think that you'd need some kind of I don't know, like a government subsidy to make that affordable to a lot of homeowners and to a lot of people who have homes. Is that a possibility that
Well,
you get sort of a backing by the government in order to effectuate this? Or I mean, what's the average cost to the consumer going to be?
we hope to keep it to about $1 a watt to start with, and the more we make, of course, the cheaper the product's going to be. Uh, but the, right now, a generator costs you $2.50 to $4 a watt to buy, and we will start out with just $1 a watt to buy it.
So how much, like, I don't even understand this. You can tell by my simplistic questions. So how much in terms of like my house, I'm looking around in my little apartment and I'm trying to figure out how much would this cost? Because I know my landlord's a retired man. He's a truck driver. Him and his wife bought this house as an investment for their retirement, right? So they don't have a lot of spare beans to pour into this place. So, how much would it cost them essentially to, let's say you're up in production, what do you project it to cost? Like a person who owns a little apartment complex that has like 3 or 4 apartments, I mean, or an average homeowner that has, say, a 2-bedroom home, what would that cost be to their household?
Okay, an average homeowner will, unless you've got a really big house, 5 kilowatts is all that you would need, and that way the power company would pay you every month if you stayed attached to the grid. Uh, Normally, you can run a house at around 3 kilowatts, that's 3,000 watts, but you're not using that all the time. See, the
Yeah,
power.
but that's not really my question. How much does it cost to get installed? Because I get it. It's like after it's installed, then you start getting money back because it's producing so much extra electricity. It's kind of like the conundrum that we have here in Oregon. Oregon, they have a really great program where people can install solar panels. The state basically gives you tax credits, but you have to be able to afford to put the panels on your house before you can access those. It's kind of like what Bernie Sanders said to Ted Cruz, access doesn't mean affordability. You can have access to the best health care in the world. If you can't afford it, what's the point? So my question is, what do you think the average cost is for a household, say a 2-bedroom house? What would that initial outlay be? I know it'll start feeding them back, but not to be contentious here, but I'm just trying to figure out realistically how we would move this, because a lot of people's primary factor is, how do you get it installed?
Well, it would be between $3,000 and $5,000 per
Okay.
average household.
Kind of like a panel. That's how, like, that's about the cost of solar panels. I had a friend of mine here in Oregon who put solar panels on his house. I think it was $3,500, the whole cost. Yeah, or maybe it was $7,000. I think he had to pay $7,000. And every
Yeah,
year he gets a $1,500 tax credit back from. I mean, it's hilarious the way people think that's a good deal. I mean, I do taxes, so you get a $1,500 tax credit and you get $400 back or something, $200. I mean, it's kind
yeah,
of not
that's a
really.
6-year payback.
Yeah,
That's ridiculous.
yeah, it's right. It is. So what
No,
you're saying is after an initial outlay, I get it. So this is a thing. They can be creative on how they finance it, but and the more you produce, like a person who has a big apartment complex will pay a lot less because it's obviously a bigger unit and the cost goes down exponentially, probably.
well, yeah, we've got a multi-coil system that will generate enough power for small industry. So we can scale that for any size necessary for an apartment complex or single family dwellings.
Well, under our current system, would this have to be regulated? Like, would the Department of Energy want to talk to you and you'd have to get it licensed and all that other stuff? Or is this just something that you can sell and start putting out there?
We will have to deal with the government.
You
And
are.
that's why our business plan is to start out in a third world country. Once we power the third world, the first world will make their governments accept it.
Well, the problem with the third world government is that the governments are pretty much in the pocket. Most of them are in the pocket of, the United States or Great Britain or something, and they may not. Are you talking to anybody from those governments? I mean, how would you get these
Yeah,
into those markets?
that's rapidly changing. Uh, we're in discussions now with the government of Ghana, Togo, Chad, Indonesia, Malaysia, and New Guinea.
Wow.
And each one of these governments will subsidize our program so that their people can afford it.
Huh.
So, yeah, once we get started, it's gonna it should develop rather fast. One of our other portions of our business plan is that we realize that we will never be able to meet the production needed for the world. So we will sell license agreements for other people that are other inventors to use our product in their inventions, to power their inventions.
Oh, wow, that's a great idea.
And that way, as a license holder, they'll be able to make the coils as they need them, and we won't have to meet their production rate.
Now, do you guys have this as a formalized corporation? Have you formed a company that people can look up, or is it still sort of all on the ground floor, figuring it out stuff?
We have incorporated in the Seychelles Islands off the east coast of Africa, simply because they do not share any information with any other governments at all.
Wow. How long have you been working on this, Larry?
We started trying in 2001. We succeeded in 2009.
Wow. How did you come up with the idea? You started in 2001. What made you, how did you come up with the idea? How did that whole thing start? How did this whole idea brainstorm start?
Well, I'm an old man and I'm cheap. I don't want to fix anything. I don't want to work on it. I don't want to lubricate it. I don't want to call in a service technician. I want to buy something, plug it in, and forget it. And that's sort of what we had in mind. We wanted a product that would be more efficient, safe, which everything that's electric and electronic right now is not safe. And we wanted it to be cheap. So through geometry and all these ancient maths and ancient cave drawings and the emerald tablets and rock reliefs, all of this points to exactly what we're doing. All of the information that we have is gleaned from the ancients. So it's all out there. It's all in plain sight. Those pictures don't have anything to do with religion. Those pictures are describing how electrical equipment operates.
What?
They're shown in the pictures. Light bulbs are shown in the pictures.
Yes, I've seen
power supply is shown in the pictures.
The big, gigantic light bulbs, right? They look like an old-time phonograph, right?
Yeah, exactly. And those are light bulbs. See, okay, let's go to the pyramids for a little bit. 177 feet or so below the Great Pyramid is a gigantic room that is dug out over the aquifer. That means that there's running water through the granite of the earth. Granite has a high crystalline structure, that what they made the pyramids out of, and that conducts electricity. That means that all of the tunnels in the pyramid could conduct electricity. With the water running through this room, whether it beat on the ceiling and created a pulse, which would be piezoelectricity, or whether it was just the flow of the water that did it. That was channeled up through a tunnel into what they called the Baghdad battery room. There were hundreds of batteries in this room. You hook a battery in series or in parallel, one will increase the amperage, the other will increase the voltage. So you can get any amperage and voltage that you want to operate this pyramid with. That power was transferred through a tunnel up into the Queen's chamber. The Queen's chamber was filled with mineral salts. It could have been urine, it could have been zinc oxide, it could have been a lot of things, but there was some form of electrolyte in the Queen's chamber. When that was energized with the electricity going through the pyramid, it created hydrogen. There's another electrical conductive chamber that goes up into the viewing gallery, the grand gallery. In the top and bottom of the grand gallery are slots for tuning reeds so that they can tune the frequency of the hydrogen gas as it goes through there. That is funneled into the King's chamber. The King's chamber is where all the magic happens. There are 5 gigantic stones on top of that. 3 sides of each of those stones is perfect and smooth and shiny. The top of each of those stones has got drilled holes in it, chunks knocked out of it. They look terrible, but that was done to tune those giant blocks to a specific frequency to allow that pyramid to put out what I think probably was microwave energy of some form that will allow communication, levitation, transportation, healing, energy source for anything, all transmitted through the air to the monoliths that were the receiving stations. So it was all a big Tesla system.
It was kind of like an electrical grid themselves, all these pyramids.
Yeah, but the power goes out through the air like Tesla.
Well, now what about the ones that are in South America? That's the weird part, is we have these pyramids around the world that are kind of all similar but a little bit different. Were they the same type?
It's all the same kind of operation. Some of the pyramids have great, huge mercury pools in them for conducting the electricity.
I recently read about a pyramid that looked like it had exploded from the inside out. Do you know about that one?
Yeah, that was during okay, I can't say that on the radio. There was
You can say whatever you want on the radio. It doesn't matter. You can say what you want here.
Well, people might think I'm crazy. I believe that in the ancient past there was a war. And that war was done with sophisticated weapons, plasma weapons, things like that, microwave weapons. If you'll study that, the disintegrating rock on that pyramid, it was heated from the inside. There's a normal layer of rock on the outside of it, but the inside of it crumbles. And that's dolerite. That is one of the hardest rocks that we know of. So it's really hard to make that crumble unless it's extremely heated. And that had to have been done with a microwave to heat it from the inside out, because the surviving stones have a very thin layer of the original stone on the outside. But once you break that off, the inside crumbles like dirt. So it's, in my mind, there was an ancient internal heat source that made that pyramid dissolve.
Do you think they used nuclear power?
Absolutely.
They did?
Not the Egyptians, no. Before the Egyptians, back in India, Back in the 25,000 years before modern civilization, when the Vimana were flying, that's when they used atomic weapons.
The Ramana, is that what you said?
Yes, ma'am. That's what the ancient Hindus call the ancient flying machines.
Huh. So I've seen pictures of that. Like those are all sort of technical looking drawings.
Yes, ma'am.
And they're sort of we've been taught in the Western world that those are just an artist's projection of what they could do. You think that's a historical reading?
Yeah, it's definitely historical reading. Our government and the Western civilization is just trying to keep us stupid. We've gone through their drawing.
Wow. Well, I'm thinking it's probably because they don't want to, the Queen is supposed to be from God, right? So life started when the Queen of England, when Jesus Christ was born. They're trying to tell us that there's life is no more than just a few thousand years old, 10,000 years old. So that.
Boy, are they wrong.
Yeah, boy, are they wrong. Human life has been around for a long, long time. This is the odd part. It's kind of cruel. I posted an article this morning written by Truth Out called The Cruelty of Our Culture. And this does seem to be sort of hand in hand. It's sort of the culmination of this cruelty of the last 700 years is like we've developed into a culture that really is antithetical to life. Those of us that are trying to find alternatives, we're considered nutters. You know what I mean? It's
look at just the Catholic Church, what they have done to society. They had the Spanish Inquisition, which was where they gathered everybody that had any knowledge that they did not know, tortured them to get every bit of it out of them, and then killed them. So the Vatican was the holder of all truth.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that let out what knowledge they want to. What we term as magic is simply science we don't understand yet.
Well, what I'd like you to do is explain a little bit how this, we got into this thing about the pyramids because it has to do with basically what we deem free energy, right? Like in that culture, was it possible for those people to have had energy all around, or was it just a few elite, do you think, that had the energy?
Well, the elite had the energy. The priesthood had the energy. The priests were workers. The priests were the scientists, the plumbers, the electricians, the carpenters. The priests held the knowledge because they could, because the people supported the priesthood. The priests didn't have to go out and work the fields. The priests were supplied with everything they needed, and they were the keepers of the knowledge. They were the users of the knowledge, and the elite used the knowledge. The general people, the general public, were still on foot, not flying around in the flying machines, not using the power, although they could go to the priesthood and let the priesthood use the power on them for healing or whatever. The energy that was created back then was basically for the elite. But the Pharaoh dynasties in Egypt did not have pyramid power supplies. They say that that's the temple of Khufu. The Great Pyramid was built by Khufu. No, it wasn't. He spent 20 years trying to make it work again unsuccessfully because he didn't know the science behind it.
You think that the Egyptians sort of stumbled on these buildings?
There were 8 rulers that ruled the earth for 26,000 years before the first Egyptian pharaoh, and their civilization was on the Giza Plateau. The Egyptians simply moved in afterwards and took over their sites and built over the top of the ancient megalithic structures. The deeper you go in Egyptian construction, the larger the stonework is. So the Egyptians didn't know how to do that. They didn't know how to levitate the stone. And these days, anybody can do levitation.
What do you mean by that? They can do levitation.
Let's go to Ed Leedskalnin in Coral Gardens. A little 5-foot tall man, I think he was 5'2", used tons and tons of coral rock to build Coral Gables, Coral Gardens. He did that through frequency. You add every frequency that there is has another frequency that'll cancel it out, the opposite frequency. So once you know the subatomic frequency of any material, you can make it float with sound. That's what frequency is. Frequency is sound. Some frequencies we can't hear, but it's all a form of sound waves. So you can levitate anything.
You're telling me that, and when was this done? You're saying that somebody levitated all the blocks in a building so that they could build this building?
He built a gigantic garden with 2, 3, 4-ton stones by himself, alone.
Wow.
All he did was transfer the frequency. Leedskalnin came up with a device that he called a perpetual motion holder. I call it a permanent magnet holder. What it does is it's designed to circulate the magnetic field in one piece of material. Once you get the proper magnetic field to float a sample of the rock, that specific frequency that can then, through this PMH, can then be transferred out to the quarry to lift a larger block. The frequency doesn't care how much the weight is.
And this is called the Venetian pools. Is that what that's called? Is that what you're talking about in Coral Gables?
Yeah, it could be.
Is it the one that's in Florida? I was just
yes,
Googling
ma'am.
it.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So on Wikipedia, it says nothing about levitation on how it was built.
Yeah, everybody says that a little 5'2" man hoisted those things up with a piece of chain and moved them around by himself.
It was built on
way
4
possible.
acres. It was built on 4 acres.
Yeah, and it's all gigantic stone. He had a 2-ton door that would open with a finger push.
A 2-ton door?
Yeah.
So what happened to that technology? They just buried it? They just killed it?
The governments have killed it. And he learned everything that he knew from Daniel Davis and the Davis Manual of Magnetism that was written in 1842. 1842, they knew how to do every bit of that. And that's where he got his knowledge. It originated with the Egyptians, but Daniel Davis knew exactly what was going on with it and wrote a college textbook about it. And that not only covers magnetic energy, thermal energy, piezoelectricity, how to make magnets. It's an excellent, excellent book. And anybody out there that's interested in magnetics in any form, or electricity for that matter, the Davis Manual of Magnetism, written by Daniel Davis in 1842. Can
you find a copy of it? Like, can you buy a book at the bookstore?
I'll post the link in here. I have to get my other stuff back up. But
Davis Manual of Magnetism, PDF. I think you can get a PDF online. That's what it looks like to me.
Yes,
Daniel Davis Jr., 1842. You can go to magneticuniverse.com. Wow. That's pretty amazing.
This is a book that everybody that's doing electrical work and frequency work and magnetic work needs to read. This will explain everything that you thought about but couldn't figure out.
Huh. That's super fascinating. That is super fascinating. So they've known about this for a long time and have just suppressed it, really,
Yeah,
essentially.
exactly. Yeah,
Wow.
that our secret space program operates on these principles.
It's it's the secret everybody knows about. Is that
Yeah,
like
exactly. Our magnetic drive spaceships that they're killing people with. Uh,
wow.
2 or 3 months ago, we talked to an ex-NASA scientist that was working on this, a physicist, and he told us that they okay, our company has designed a magnetic drive system, but it takes 4 coils in order to be safe. The government's magnetic drive system uses 2 coils, one in the front and one in the back. And when they do these high G maneuvers, there is what's called a phase shift. And that means that the two magnetic fields move, and some of the people that are being protected inside that magnetic bubble are moved outside of that magnetic bubble and suffer the full effects of the inertia, and they die. So they haven't quite got it right yet. Uh, I kind of think that we do, because we're using 4 of them and don't get a phase shift like that when we make the maneuvers.
Wow. Well, I'm going to add that link to the show. I'm going to ask Jules to add that link because that sounds super important for anybody who really, and it sounds like a good book just to have, just in case, like if you really had to figure this out on your own, just looking at it, I just opened up the PDF. It actually seems like if you had any basic knowledge of science at all, you could actually figure out how to generate your own electricity after a little while.
If you start at page 1 of that book with your children, they will know how to make magnets. They will know how to make magnetic electricity. They will know how to make thermal electricity.
Wow.
And it's a step-by-step, easy-to-learn book if you start at the beginning. Just
wow.
like you can't wind up a watch and tell people you know how to make one.
Wow. That's really amazing. Well, this is the thing. This is how humanity has survived, though. We've always had this like push-pull between the power elites who want to exclude the bulk of humanity and the rest of humanity who say we have a right to live. What's ironic about it, Larry, is I don't know. I wonder, I guess we don't speak their languages, but I wonder if this is like how, I mean, it just seems so astounding that humans have this such capacity. We have big hearts. We have a lot of emotions. We have a lot of energy, a lot of power, and yet continually throughout our cultures, we seem to continue to do this exclusion instead of inclusion. You know what I mean? There's always this push to exclude people. This is what I think the current extermination event that's going on right now about Fukushima that's happening with the nuclear industry. I honestly have come to my opinion. I didn't believe this 3 or 4 years ago when Fukushima happened and I discovered that we're in a big trouble. I had no idea. I actually really do believe this is an intentional extermination. I don't think it's an accident. I think it's part of their plan. They see it as the inevitable, necessary end.
The earthquake that happened off the coast of Japan was caused by our sonic weapons.
What?
HARP can do that. Submarines have weapons on them that can make a fault line fall in. We've got that technology. It's around the world. HARP is one of 8 different methods.
Do you think they intentionally did it? Do you think it was an intentional one?
Yeah, I really do. And as soon as
2011 is a number 9.
Yes, ma'am.
And they love 9/11. There's something about that number they love.
Let me talk about 9.
Wow.
9 to me is magic.
Wow.
If you if you look at a magnet, let's say, and this is not a fact, but let's say that in order for a magnet to work, there are tiny little particles that come out of each end of it. We're just calling them particles for a term to use. So these little particles are coming out, and they follow the magnetic flux lines. Some of them get away, but most of them follow the flux lines. And when they do that, they travel from one end down to the other and go through the center of that magnet, which is the number 9 point. A lot of people call it the 0 point, where 0 point energy comes from. I call it number 9, the transition point. That's where the DNA spiral of the magnetic flux lines is flattened out, and the polarity of it is changed through the center point of that magnet. That's number 9. North and south switch from 3 to 6. 9 is always constant. 3 and 6 always change polarity. That is the secret of every good electrical coil. You've got to have a space in there so that the magnetic field can grow to its full potential. And most people are leaving that part out.
So you're giving me kind of a science lesson here, Larry. I didn't really understand any of this stuff. You put it in such simple terms, though, that it actually, my brain is kind of like just clicking around right now, because I'm thinking about how all things interconnect. That's sort of how, this is what's brought me to the idea of having people who understand different alternative energy sources and ways to cope and deal with this reality that we have been forced inside of a nuclear stew. And we are here, and there's no getting out of it. To glaze over our eyes and pretend it's not real is not enjoying life, because this is the life we have. That's how I feel. Like there's
absolutely no need for any type of nuclear energy sources at all. There's a 50 volt differential, but every 3 meters above the Earth. There's a 50 volt differential between the Earth potential and the potential at 3 meters. So, or at 1 meter, excuse me, every meter you get a 50 volt differential. So you can run a wire 10 meters up in the air and get 500 volts out of it.
Wow. Do you think they knew what they were doing when they did that earthquake off of Japan?
Yeah.
Do you think they knew how big it would be?
I'm not sure they knew the magnitude of it, but I know that they knew what they were doing.
You think they intentionally caused the nuclear plant to melt down?
I do, yes.
And go into catastrophic, because what's really been bizarre, I mean, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years ago when I first heard about this, I might have balked at that idea. But I'm on the radio 5 days a week because our governments are ignoring it. Every government on this planet ought to be coping with figuring out how to stop that. It's like we have a bullet wound and they're just letting the patient bleed to death. I mean, I think about how there's just indiscriminate killing and a lot of times in the inner cities of the police of black young men. As a matter of fact, they target them.
If you'll check the facts on that, more white boys are killed by the police than black boys.
Yes, but the target practice is on black kids.
Yeah.
Because you know why? White boys challenge the police. They don't think they'll kill them.
Really?
That's what it's about. That's what I think. Because they just can't believe that these guys would they believe in the Constitution. They believe, like, I have my rights. You'll hear that all the time. Some dumbass like, I have my rights. No, you don't. You never hear a black guy. Very few black people, when they're in the throes of, the women might say that, I have my rights. No, you don't. And so, wow.
According to the United States laws, you can't even assemble in your backyard. You can't have family members that don't live in your house assemble in your backyard for a barbecue without a permit.
Where's that? That's not true.
Yes, it is.
What's the name of that? Tell me. I'm going to look into that.
Check out your local laws on assembly.
Okay, I will. I will, because we assemble. There's always assemblies here. I live in Eugene, Oregon, and people are always out in the streets.
Yeah,
Like,
but if they wanted to, they could stop all that because you don't have a permit.
you don't need a permit on your own property.
You need a permit for lawful assembly. That's what they'll say. And lawful assembly is any group of people that do not live on the property.
Yeah, but you're entitled to have guests in your home.
If you have a backyard barbecue and they want to stop it and you don't have a permit, they can stop it.
That's actually true. I've been at big parties where the police have come in and said, this is too big, you've got to shut it down.
Yep.
So that's in fact what they said. This is an unlawful assembly.
Yes, ma'am.
That's actually true. There was a lot of people at this party out in Topanga Canyon one time, and the neighbor was really furious because this whole street was lined with cars. He called the police, and they said, well, just tone it down. They didn't like arrest anybody. They just said tone it down, and they made them, a lot of people when the police showed up said, I'm leaving. So that quelled the fire, I guess.
No.
This is pretty amazing information. So Davis's Manual of Magnetism by Daniel Davis Jr. So is this information simple enough, say, for a teenager to comprehend?
Absolutely. It's simple enough for a 7-year-old.
Great.
I know a 7-year-old in Australia that's right on top of every bit of this. He's an amazing young man.
Wow.
This is my point. You need to get your children involved in this.
Yes.
Make a fun project. My daddy had me in the basement making a magnetic motor when I was 12 years old. We ran off of a 1.5 volt D-size flashlight battery. We ran a 12-volt light for 1.5 years off of a magnetic motor off the same battery. Okay.
I'm looking through this as you're talking, and the text looks simple. The drawings are easy for everyone to understand. They're large enough print so people could read it. Wow.
It's my favorite book.
I can see why. I'm actually it's 289 pages, 238 pages. I think I'm going to print this out. I mean, honestly, it's worthwhile printing out and putting in a little binder. Larry, this hour has gone very, very, very fast. We're at 8:58 and 20 seconds. We have 59 seconds. Is there a website that you have yet?
No.
Okay. Well, you'll have to come back on the radio with us. And we do have you scheduled for the beginning of May. I'm so looking forward to that. You've been listening to Larry Woods, citizen scientist, and as you hear, plethora of information. Put your courage feet on, you guys. Larry, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I loved it.
Me too. I really appreciate it. Please take some action. I'll have the link of this in the show. Put your courage feet on. Talk to you guys later.